Welcome back to Dialed In Angling Podcast. I am your host, Tony Roach. We are sponsored by Strike Master Augers, Onyx Fish, and St. Croix Rods. Just arrived in Selkirk, Manitoba. We're going to fish lovely Lake Winnipeg. Lake Winnipeg is by far one of my favorite walleye destinations on the planet. It has been for a long time, and it has been because of this guy that I'm sitting next to, Lee Nolden. One of the first times I came up to Lake Winnipeg, I fished with Lee. I fished with Roger Stearns. They showed me the rope. They were catching these great big greenbacks up here and showing the world what a quality fishery Lake Winnipeg was at the time and what still is today. Lee, we're sitting in your shop here, smoking fish in Selkirk, Manitoba. I am so happy to be here, my friend. Welcome to the Dialed In Angling Podcast.
We're glad to have you up here. I was so excited when I found out you were coming up, and we were going to get the chance to hook up again and chat about old times.
Yeah, you know, I think of the lipless crankbait phenomena that took over North America. It started on Lake Winnipeg.
It started right up here. That was my good buddy Roger Stearns started that, messing around with those. I got into it like the next week. We started just pounding fish with them. I know guiding, I paid for my gas one year selling crankbaits out of the back of my truck. You know, because at the time there was very few brands available, and they were just very hard to get. Nobody had ever used them. You know, we had special rods built because we need a little heavier rod for that type of thing, but we really fine-tuned that over the years, and I know they use them all over now. Rapala, some of the other companies everybody's come out with lipless crankbaits now.
Yeah, it created a whole category. I mean, it literally started here on Lake Winnipeg. I remember the first time I came up to fish with you guys, you were guiding. Roger welcomed me with open arms, and we came up here, and he had all sorts of painted up baits and different baits that you guys had in your tackle boxes. And I remember our buddy Phil Jensen, you know, He handed me this Rattling wrap or whatever it was at the time, and I dropped it down, and I'm jigging this lipless crankbait, and the first thing I could feel was it felt like bees underneath my feet. I could feel that loud rattle chamber. But I wasn't quite sold on it. You know, at the time I was a huge, jig fan, using jig wraps, that sort of thing. So, I'm thinking, oh man, all I wanted to do was put a jig wrap on, or a jigging spoon tipped with a minnow head or something, or a salty on. I hadn't bought into the lipless crankbait phenomenon because I hadn't caught a fish. I always say, to get confident in a bait, you have to catch fish on it.
Yes.
Well, we're standing around and we're all hole hopping outside. It was my first time to Lake Winnipeg. I dropped that bait down. You could feel it buzzing underneath your feet. And all of a sudden, I'm kind of looking around, glancing to see if anyone's catching anything. And wham, my arm just about got pulled out of my socket. And here it was a walleye. Giant walleye, one of the great Lake Winnipeg greenbacks. Here I was catching them on these huge lipless crankbaits. And from then on, I was a believer. And every time I see some sort of horizontal presentation after that, actually, I went back to the United States thinking how I could modify different lures to create more horizontal presentations. And it all started with you guys right here.
Yeah, no, it was a big thing when we first started doing that. And it's still going today. Now, every company out there's got a lipless crankbait that they can use, and they use them all over. And then as we started using them, you can do different modifications to them, and we fish them differently. I've got a buddy who dead sticks them. He hangs a minnow between the two hooks, and he keeps one. He'll actively work one and then dead stick one, and that works. What guys are doing now is they'll have a jig and a live minnow on, or a live minnow set up, and then the hole next to it, they'll be calling them in, hog calling, we call it. So they don't always hit that crankbait, but it will get them in and bring them close. And if they don't like that, you can use your other presentation as a more finessey move. But we finesse even with the crankbaits. You see them coming with the new electronics that everybody uses now. You can bring them up, and you can watch that fish come up to you and go vertical on you and whack.
It's cool. It's definitely the rattle baits, the horizontal presentations. They're certainly a call bait, and if they won't hit that bait, then boom, they hit the dead stick. I think of Lake Winnipeg as, one of those destinations that has been on the minds of ice anglers now for almost 2 decades. It's pretty remarkable.
You and I, it's been 20 years. I think you were up here actively involved in one of the big fishing derbies at the time.
Yeah, AYA.
Yep. So you were up doing that, and that's when we kind of met, and that's got to be over 20 years ago.
I just remember there wasn't a ton of Americans up here yet. No. There was a lot of people from Winnipeg that would come up on the weekends because we fished during the week and there was hardly anybody. And then the weekends, it was like, wow, look at because you could drive out there that year and there was trucks everywhere and people fishing. I just remember a lot of people fishing with like Whistler type of jigs and salties. And boom, within, I would say, a 5-year time span, it went from that to tons of Americans coming up.
What it is now. Yeah. We notice here at Smoke and Fish, we're like the go-to must-see tackle shop in the area. So we've got fishing licenses, all your live bait, all your other baits. We give guys a lot of information on what landings are good, what parts of the lake where the fish are biting. So we get, 5,000 to 10,000 guys a year coming through here. Wow. So it's a huge tourist thing for the province of Manitoba. You guys spend a lot of money up here, and one thing, you're spending less now because the exchange rate's about 40%. So sure, if you're looking to come up, it's real economical now to come up here.
No, absolutely. It's a great destination for people. If you've heard about the giant walleyes, the big greenbacks, you have to experience it for yourself. It's really neat. It's really not that difficult to fish out there as far as structure-wise.
Correct.
But it is difficult to navigate the ice. I always tell people, stop at the local bait shops, get intel from guys like Lee, talk to the guides, book a guide. A guide can bring you out there. If you've never been up here before, if you don't know where the landings are at, call one of the guides. There's a ton of great guides on the lake.
There is.
There's lots of people that are really helpful with information. The first thing I learned when I came up here was all of the guys that were up here, like yourself, Roger, Alex Kessler, like everybody I fished with back then, they were super, super open about sharing information. And even now when I call today, to book this trip, I wanted to come up here with Dialed In Angling, fish the big greenbacks. I made a bunch of phone calls and everybody was super nice, super friendly, willing to help out. They were like giving me fishing information. I'm the same way when it comes to fishing information as a guide. I'm always sharing information. So it's great to hear that from the other guides. As far as the fishery goes, the health of the fishery, I know lakes cycle, there's changes in lakes. Where are we at right now with Lake Winnipeg? Because the first time I came up here, there was lots of big greenbacks and the water was super dirty.
So right now, our fish population is really, really high. We've got tons of 20 to 26-inch fish. So up here, that translates into 3 to 6 7-pounders. Like, guys are just amazed at how many nice fish you can catch. It's not uncommon to catch 20 to 25 fish a day, and they're all over 4 pounds, up to 10. We do have zebra mussels now, so that's changed things a little bit. But it's cleaned up the water. So what we're doing a little bit more is fishing more like you guys do down south. With our cleaner water, we're downsizing a little bit sometimes. We used to use sometimes spoons 6 inches long we were ripping. So we're using smaller style baits a little bit. A little more live bait we're using, not always, but sometimes along with the salties. And with the new electronics and stuff that guys are running, you can really get them dialed in quick.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's been like the last couple of years has been really, really good. A few years ago, we had tons of fish, but they're all smaller. Now those fish have all grown up. So, we can see where everything's very healthy up here, fish-wise. In talking to a few of the fisheries guys, the rainbow schmelt, that's what kind of got them so big in the first place. They crashed. I don't even remember how long ago, 10, 15 years ago, but they're starting to come back. But you're going to see tomorrow how fat those walleyes are.
Sure.
And how and their shoulders. So they're very healthy fishery up here.
That's always been the intrigue for me, is coming up here and seeing those fish with the small heads and the giant body. That's the first thing you'll notice if you've never been to Lake Winnipeg to see the greenbacks. They got these little teeny heads and these giant bodies and this bright emerald green back to them. You touched on downsizing and finesse fishing a little more. The very first time I came up here, it was big, giant lipless crankbaits. But now I would say the evolution, it's been about 3 years since I've been here. But even so, we were downsizing even then,
yes.
3 years ago, to number 5 rip and wraps and even slab wraps. Some of the times they don't want the rattle as loud, like you touched on.
Yeah.
And so, if you're looking for any sort of information, you come up here, come see Lee. He's one of the pioneers of fishing this lake. Lee, I'm going to get you back to work here. His phones are ringing at the bait shop. You can hear the tanks in the background. It was great catching up with you, my friend. I'm looking forward to hitting the lake here. You're going to want to stay tuned for more Dialed In Angling podcasts. We're going to have a 3-part series when we're up here in Manitoba. Thanks, Lee. The Dialed In Angling podcast is brought to you by St. Croix Rods, handcrafting the best rods on earth for an elevated angling experience since 1948. St. Croix Rods are truly a world-class brand that has earned the respect and admirations of anglers across the planet. I trust St. Croix Rods, and you should too. Check them out at stcroixrods.com. Okay, my next guest is Donovan Pearase. We are actually on Lake Winnipeg right now with Donovan. He was nice enough to lead us out in the trucks. It's very rare that I've come to Lake Winnipeg where I can actually drive vehicles out here. But that's the case this year. We don't have a ton of snow. So, we didn't have to worry about hauling machines up from the States to come out. I called Donovan. He was cool. He's like, yeah, we're on fish. Come on out. Donovan, thanks for being on the Dialed In Angling podcast, my friend.
Oh, man, Tony, my pleasure. I'm glad to come out here with you and lead you out and put you up some fish. And you guys do some really good work in the industry. I'm glad to help out.
Lake Winnipeg has always had a special place in my heart since the first time I've come up here. I talked and reminisced a little bit with Lee Nolden. We talked about fishing with Roger Stearns and just the good times I've had with all the guys that I've met from Manitoba have always just welcomed me with open arms. And they're fishermen like yourself, a lot of the guys up here that they just want to get after it. And this place in particular has some of the biggest walleyes on the planet. There's a reason that this destination has been on kind of the radar of ice anglers for almost 2 decades now, but it just continues to produce big fish year after year.
Yeah, Tony, it's really something else. Like you mentioned Roger Stearns there, and we all kind of cut our teeth on Lake Winnipeg with Roger. I mean, back in the days when I was literally just into ice fishing, Roger was involved in the Walleye Club, and I met him, and I met one of my main lead guides and good friends, Brad Kisselback, through that club. And I mean, we learned following Roger Stearns around, and I mean, we would have got there, but he shortened the learning curve substantially for us. He showed us tactics and techniques and how to hunt these fish that we never were completely foreign to us. And yeah, and then Lee Nolden too. Lee Nolden was a big part of that as a guide. I learned a lot from him over the years, and we've kind of taken what they've learned and expand on it. It's, it's pretty cool because it's getting closer to 20 years than it is to 10 now. And it's, it's really cool because we've seen this lake now going in cycles where we've seen year classes come up, get huge, and then die off, and new come through. So it's really been quite the experience, and you nailed it, man. No matter how much you do this, I mean, you just never get tired of it. No matter the conditions, every bite on Lake Winnipeg could potentially be a fish of a lifetime, right? Even if you're only catching a few a day, it could be that 30-inch monster you're looking for.
Yeah, and the lake is so healthy. I mean, even the eater-sized fish are impressive. And they fight, and I just love the way you fish. Lee and I talked about how this lake basically created the category of horizontal rattle baits. I mean, before that, it just didn't exist. And when you come up here and you're fishing a great big rattle bait, at times, it's not the only presentation that works, but fishing a great big rattle bait to me is like, I'm home. I'm on Lake Winnipeg. So if you saw like yesterday, the first thing I grabbed was a number 6 rip and wrap. I wanted to feel that vibration of that rattle bait. And lo and behold, boom, the first fish I caught, I don't want to tease out the whole episode, but the first fish I caught was a good one. It was on a rattle bait. That's just so cool. And I like how, ice anglers are innovative to begin with, but you guys up here, it seems like you're innovative. Every year the bite changes with the techniques, the tools, the style of fishing you're doing. But either way, no matter how you cut it, you have to fish aggressive when you're up here. I've learned that you don't fish like you're finesse fishing a walleye in the States, right? You got to really crack those baits. What do you think?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, and that's the first thing we tell all of our guests, even seasoned guests who've been here for 10 years, you're only here for 3-4 days at a time. You go back home, you get into your patterns. I tell guys, the number one thing is guys aren't even close to as aggressive as they need to be. Even guides, even experienced anglers coming up here, just you have to get so much more aggressive with these fish at times to get them to bite, and even fishing up high and making them chase. It's a different world, and quite often we have to sit beside guests and grab the rods and shake them and really show them how to work these fish to get them to go some days. And like fishing's fishing, they get finicky, and there's a finesse aspect to it too, even live minnows and stuff. But yeah, generally these fish, like you see with the rattle baits, the rattle baits are still one of the best search tools you can use. We spend more time using spoons and baited spoons and stuff like that for numerous reasons. We tend to get more consistent bites. You lose less fish than you do on a rattle bait, but rattle baits are still money at times. Like you got to have them on sometimes, and it's it's kind of funny. You mentioned the live target craze. Like Roger Stearns was one of the first guy to ever bring live targets to Lake Winnipeg, and I mean there was a few guys using rattle baits before, but it was really not widely known or accepted. And Roger brought him out, and actually one of my guides, hands down without question, Brad Kisselback, is the first angler on planet Earth to catch a master angler walleye on a live target rattle bait on Lake Winnipeg. Because when Roger first brought him up here, they were brand new. He handed them out that day on the ice to a few guys, and Brad went out and caught a master. So he can take credit for that.
Right on. That's super cool. I love the backstories on that. Speaking of backstories, so what's your backstory? Let's hear a little bit more about Donovan and how you got started. Not only ice guiding, I know you do open water as well. The name of your guide service, obviously Blackwater Cats, your background in catfishing, walleye fishing. Let people know about yourself.
Yeah, so I started off as a poor kid with not really much. I didn't have a pot to piss in, to be honest. Single mom on social assistance and didn't have much. So I as long as I can remember, I had a passion for fishing. I think my stepfather took me out when I was very young, and it just was it for me. Fishing and hockey my whole life. That's all it's been. And, when I was younger, I used to literally hand-me-down bike, a broken fishing rod I would found that I would tape together, bike down to the local river with night crawlers I found off the street in the rain and throw them out there. And that's all I could do. And then once in a while, my mom would drive me down to Lockport after we got our social assistance check and literally go down there, get McDonald's, and I would go wade into the water in Lockport in the fast current up to my chest with old sneakers or whatever and slam catfish on pickerel rigs. Like it was, it was just like whatever I could do to get on the water, right? And it was a big influence was Doug Stange, in fisherman for me, because I remember I was fishing. My uncle and I went in his old wooden boat in the Red River, went to go visit my grandpa in the St. Boniface Hospital. So he figured he'd take the boat to shore, we'd visit him, go back out and do some fishing, and to make a day of it. So I got back to the boat first and did some fishing, and I think I was like 12 years old, and I caught my first ever huge channel cat. I mean, I was just sitting in the boat, and I remember the rod slammed against the side of the boat, and I was like, I thought the boat shifted. So I reeled this thing, and it was a 36-inch cat, and that was it. That was it for me. Game over. I was a C- student. I don't think I'd read a whole book in my life. I went straight to the fishing hole. I bought Channel Catfish Fever, Doug Stange, right? Sure. I read that book cover to cover 3 times, studied the tactics, started trying to apply them to the local rivers and streams, and that was it for me. And he's what got me going. And I've been very fortunate to meet him several times and fish with him and shoot shows, and it's been a lifelong dream and stuff. But that started me with that, and then I got into ice fishing. It was, I haven't fished my whole life. It was maybe 20 years ago, and maybe a little bit longer. And I met Roger Stearns to the club. I went and bought all the ice fishing gear, got out there, and after a year of ice fishing, I thought, hey, you know what? Maybe there's some money to be made with this. This would be cool. Maybe I could just get through my winter until my open water season starts. Sure. Well, lo and behold, that led to like being the absolute main event. Like, I mean, we're very busy in summer and open water and stuff like that, but ice fishing is still like 60-70% of our income. We're so busy in the wintertime now with the Blackwater Cats Outfitter. And I got a whole team of guides, and yeah, it's unbelievable, man. Like, when I first started guiding out here, like literally, I mean, I'm a poor kid, man. I came from nothing, and my first guiding truck was a 2-wheel drive Sierra with tire chains, following my buddy Brad with his 4x4.
Sure.
That's how I guided. I mean, I had nothing. My first Suburban was a $1,500 94 Suburban that I didn't know if it was going to be a good investment, if I was going to get my money back out of it. And here we are today.
I can relate. When I first started ice guiding, I had a Suburban. You know, Suburbans are great because you can load gear in the back and they kind of go through everything. And if you get stuck, you can, you know, who cares? But all your stuff stays nice and dry in the back. I had a couple 4-wheelers. One in particular I still have. It's all rusty and from pulling it down the salty roads. But you kind of piecemeal together things. And then as it goes throughout the years, your gear gets better and better and better and better. And it's amazing. I think most ice anglers can relate to that as far as what they started out with gear and what they have now. Today, I mean, the kids that start today, the amount of gear that they have and the quality of gear they had versus what we had 15, 20 years ago is miles and miles ahead of what we started with. I too, first experienced Lake Winnipeg because of Doug Stange. So Doug was coming up here to film In Fisherman Ice Guide. And, I think Jeff Simpson came with him. That's kind of how I got my introduction to Roger Stearns. I also knew Roger through Ryan Sproul at Lund. And, they were actually filming. Doug and In Fisherman were filming just down from us. And I was just kind of fishing on the outside of those guys. And a kid that wasn't anywhere, he wasn't part of the filming and he wasn't part of the crew. He was just kind of in a flip over. I mean, less than 50 yards from where Doug and those guys were, and he caught a 15-pounder. Oh. And so that picture of that walleye went on the ice guide that year, that next following year. And then it seemed like from there, the Lake Winnipeg Greenbacks, they were born, right? Everybody started hearing about it. It just sort of took off from there. And it's crazy to think, how many ice anglers over the last 20 years have been able to experience this great resource that you have and how this lake continues to produce. I look at this lake right now. We're looking out the window. We're doing the interview from my truck on Lake Winnipeg. You look out the window and it's hundreds and hundreds of miles long and how fertile this resource is. It's really cool. Yeah. I like big bodies of water. I always think big bodies, if you fish a big body of water, there's big fish potential. If somebody asks me, you want to fish a big lake or a small lake? I know a lot of people like smaller bodies of water because they can break them down easier. I'd way rather pick a big body of water.
Yeah. It's funny because we've had this conversation. I've always thought about this. I love big bodies of water, but you gotta visualize it like a small body of water. The thing is, in a small body of water, you may be moving, 10 feet, 20 feet, 100 yards, 50 yards around the point. You work in a point, right? You just have to take that point and blow it up by 100 times, and your moves might be a mile, 2 miles, right? Like, and that's kind of the way I look at it. Look, and realistically, some days, making a big move on a small body of water, well, translate that to a big body of water, you might have to pull the boat out of the water and drive down the highway. And that's how the fish move on such a bigger scale, farther, faster. And it can be a daunting task, and especially open water with big wind and waves. So there's a lot of limitations on the big water that you don't get on small water. But that just makes what we do that much harder and in demand, right? Because we're out here all the time. And, you mentioned technology. Like, we were talking the other day about, like, young guide coming up with me, Caden, who starting guide with me, a young 20-year-old kid, and just a great kid, a hard worker, great attitude, miles ahead of where any of us were at his age. But he said to us the other day, he's like, I can't even imagine how you guys did it with his flashers. Like, how did you do this? Like, how did you find fish with flashers? I'm like, it was not easy. It was hard. It was grunting. It was just like working and drilling, and you had to fish holes for 15, 20 minutes rather than a 30-second scan. Like, but we did it, man. And it's just actually, the sonar, the front forward-facing sonar for finding fish has completely changed the game for us. Like, we couldn't go without it now, but it's also leveled the playing field. It's also caught a lot of guys up to us and made it easier for everybody to find fish, right? So.
Yeah, I know the first time I came to Lake Winnipeg, I sort of treated it like I do at home, where, I might grab my auger, and if I'm not catching them, drill 100 holes that way. It didn't work. I just ended up basically getting a workout, and I learned from Roger and those guys that you got to pick up and move and then drill holes and then fish them. But before forward-facing sonar, we had to fish those holes, Now it's so nice to be able to come out here, look for fish, establish that there's 20 fish in this direction or 5 this direction. You can see the size of the fish and then sit on top of them. But as far as from a angler's perspective and just getting out here, though, I mean, regardless of where you go as far as a destination for fishing, I always recommend hiring a guide. I mean, like on the way out here, it was so nice to roll out with you and your guys today and not worry about the cracks and the heaves. And, we're driving trucks out here. Things can get, serious quickly if you're not careful. So it was super cool to be able to follow you out, go out. I see you set up your guides, similar to what I do guiding and getting these guys on fish. And then you're looking for fish all day long, moving them around. You've been bopping in to check in with us. You've been more than kind. I highly, highly, highly recommend, if you're coming up to Lake Winnipeg for the first time, even if you've been here a whole bunch, look up guys like Donovan, because your trip, you spend so much money and so much effort and so much time to come on a trip like this, to just go out and poke around on your own. Yeah, anybody can throw a dart at a dartboard, but if you come out with a guy like you're on the fish quickly. So I really appreciate it, my friend.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity to come spend some time with you. I mean, I think we've chatted a few times over the years, but I really haven't got to spend too much time with you. And it was really cool because you're well known, and a lot of respect for what you do down there. You got a great name in the industry, and it's nice to get together and bump heads once in a while. And
hey, if someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just go to blackwatercats.com. All my information's on there. So you can send me an email. I got my Facebook page you can follow for. We use that throughout the ice seasons for updates and pictures and all that kind of stuff. So Facebook, Donovan Pearase, and blackwatercats.com. Send me an email and we'll get you taken care of. So
right on. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to jump out of the truck and try to get me a giant greenback here. We just started fishing, and now we're going to get after it here. I can't wait. You're going to want to stay tuned. We've got part 3 of the podcast coming up. We're going to kind of re-wrap and pull back the curtains on this week's edition of Dialed In Angling. So stay tuned. onX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Download the app today to get fisheries information in the state of Minnesota and Wisconsin, along with research tools for serious anglers and beginners alike. Filter lakes by species, trophy only, keeper fish, abundance, or all of the above. Plan which lakes to fish with the app, navigate to the accesses, and once you're there, use the onX best-in-class weather imagery and fishing hotspots to catch more fish. onX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you would never known existed. onX Fish, the app that is changing the game on ice. We are fresh off the ice from the Dialed In Angling shoot. I was lucky enough to interview Lee Nolden, one of the original guides on the lake. And then, of course, Donovan Pearase was so kind to cart us around the ice. Driving trucks on Lake Winnipeg doesn't happen every single day. And, when I talked to Donovan before I came up to Lake Winnipeg, I just said, hey, man, is that cool? We're driving trucks, because it's so rare that you can drive a vehicle on this lake. I mean, I've been fishing up here for 15, almost 20 years now. And there's only a couple times that I can remember actually being able to drive on the lake. And so I called Donovan, reached out to him, obviously reached out to Lee Nolden just because he's, runs the bait shop. He talks to anglers. Anytime I go to a destination, I'm always calling around to my buddies to see how the bite's been, what to expect, how are the conditions. Lake Winnipeg is such a monster. Like, I felt ill-prepared just packing the vehicle and, driving up. So it was so nice to have Donovan cart us around. I got a great couple of interviews. Now for the third leg of this interview, Mr. Bill Dietz, he's a good friend of mine. He was gracious enough to just come along with me fishing on this trip. Bill does a lot of trips up to Lake Winnipeg as well. He's an avid angler. He's like me and like the listening audience. He's a fish head. Bill Dietz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tony. It was a great trip. I appreciate you inviting me.
We're sitting in the hotel room. Thinking back, every Lake Winnipeg trip I go on, I usually break a lot of things. That's just part of the nature of this lake. It's so big. The ice is always so rough. Everything's frozen. This trip, we haven't broke anything. I will say I didn't break any of my equipment anyway.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a pretty straightforward trip from an equipment standpoint. And I think, when you start getting a little bit reckless, that's when things start getting out of hand. But I think you and I are getting into our elder years. So instead of driving 30 miles an hour down the ice, we went 10 miles an hour. And I think that was a big part.
I remember going on a snowmobile. It was a blizzard one time. We were with a mutual friend of ours, Phil Jensen, and it was a blizzard, and we had a couple snowmobiles, and Phil and I were way out. I mean, we were way off ashore, probably 8 to 10 miles, and it was an absolute whiteout, 50-mile-an-hour winds. It was absolutely brutal. Well, on the sleds, we had to put everything in the Otter sleds, absolutely everything we owned in the Otter sleds, because there was no room on his snowmobiles at the time. And so we're going in, and the sled I was on did not have hand warmers. And so I'm about 5 miles in, and we had crossed a bunch of ice heaves, and it was like moguls. I remember, there was a lot of snow that year. And as you know, when it's really cold and that snow freezes, it's like hard as a rock. So it's like moguls go, ski moguls. And so every bump was just all the way back. Well, my hands were getting so cold that I just kept on driving faster and faster and faster as I was getting towards shore, that when I got back to shore, I opened up my Otter sled, and the flighting, it was a steel bit at the time. The flighting on my auger bit had broke. The welds actually broke. Smashed both Markham screens. There was a soft rod case in there that was completely demolished. I remember everything that I had in that sled was demolished. Luckily, it was the last day of the trip, but who wants to break augers, Markhams, and all their rods? It was just, I was almost in tears after that trip. So this trip, even though it was super cold, was mild and paled in comparison to that trip with Phil. And again, every time you come up to Lake Winnipeg, it always seems like we break something. I was a little worried because this is my first time filming on Lake Winnipeg. I've fished up here a ton. I've never filmed up here. So to have dialed in angling up here, I was really worried about microphones and cameras and things not working. When you hit temperatures like we did in the morning, things just quit working. But, everything worked. The lithium batteries worked, the augers, we kept the augers in our truck. That was a nice thing about driving out, is we could keep everything warm. We let our trucks run for a while. We would warm up things. All our batteries are great. I've been drilling with the 24 volt all season long, and I thought, I better bring the 40 volt up here. I know they have a lot more ice than we do back at home and where I've been fishing in the Dakotas. And so, I got the 40 volt ready, grabbed a few batteries. I was amazed, keeping those things warm. They were pretty ice free in the truck, but I didn't burn through a whole lot of batteries. I thought I was going to burn through a lot more batteries than I actually did. And that's the beauty of that 40 volt. It's a workhorse, and it was fun. I don't want to tease out the whole episode, Bill, but the first thing that happened today when we got out fishing was dropping a rip and wrap, a lipless crankbait. And as you know, I absolutely love fishing lipless crankbaits. I dropped a lipless crankbait down there. You found the fish on forward-facing sonar, so I can't take all the credit, but you were like, oh, they're right over there, Tony, and I drilled a hole. I dropped down. I mean, we weren't 30 seconds, maybe a minute into the trip, and I caught my first greenback on a rip and wrap. So right then, the trip was a success. We could have ended right there. I would have been fine just going home at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually shared the same experience that you had when I first came up here, because I brought a snowmobile and I brought an Otter portable. I did not secure the 30-pound tank in there.
Oh.
And that thing was rolling around like a pinball machine. And when I got to shore, and this was the first day, I had 3 of my 5 rods were broken. I had a scratched depth finder, so that unit still worked. My Markham still worked. And probably the worst thing was I had a 10-year-old son with me, and that bag kept running over the snack bag. So
dust.
So the nacho cheese Doritos were this fine orange dust, and to see the tears welling up in his eyes when he opened that thing up was I don't want to experience that again.
Forget the rods. I mean, he wasn't concerned about the rods, but the nacho cheese Doritos were destroyed.
Exactly. But the other thing is, Lake Winnipeg is an awesome trip, but it's an awesome trip for the serious fishermen. So if you're actually a casual fisherman, it's a bit of a challenge, and you really have to be prepared for something like that. I'd never discourage somebody from coming up here, but you kind of got to know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And, it's what I love about it is you have to roll with the punches, because if you don't roll with the punches and you let the little things really kind of knock you off your game, it can actually be a tough trip for you. But I tell you, once you kind of get into some of those greenbacks, and like what we experienced today, I mean, it really didn't even depend on the size. Those things are such bulldogs when you hook into them. And what I like about them is when you're fishing 8 to 10 feet of water, they can't go down when you hook them. They have to go sideways.
Yeah.
And so when you're fighting those fish, you gave me some great advice. You got to have you got to keep that fish pinned all the time. So your drag can't be too tight, but you also have to make sure that you're always conscious about your rod tip and making sure that you're letting that fish go like it needs to go, but still keeping that constant tension on that fish.
Yeah. They are their own animals. It's amazing. You catch even a 16, 17 inch greenback, they fight like they're 20 or 21 inches. You catch a 20 incher, it fights like a 23 or 24 inch walleye. You get a 26 incher, it fights like a 29. They just absolutely bulldog you. The way they strike baits. I mean, I had 15 inch fish that were not even going to show on Dialed in Angling because we caught so many nice ones. I don't want to spoil the whole episode, but how aggressively that they ate those lipless crankbaits, the rip and wraps. They come in and they mean business. They inhale them. And then even some of the big ones just wham. I mean, they inhale it where it's all the way down their throat.
Right. Yeah. And I tell you what, the other thing that I thought was just amazing that I got such a charge out of is when you get that fish close to the hole and all of a sudden you start seeing that water level undulating. That is a charge like no other, because there's going to be a big fish coming up that hole in a pretty short order of time.
Yeah, their head shakes, just I don't know. They must be down there just shaking their head back and forth, because as they get towards that hole, it's just like, woo, woo, woo. Yeah. You can see that water boiling. And, Lake Winnipeg's dark, so you can't see them until you see that great big head coming up, or, some of them, it seems like the bigger they are, their head size doesn't get any bigger. So all of a sudden you see about the same head size. So you don't know, because the water's so stained, you don't know if it's a 20 incher or a 25 incher.
Right.
So you really have to base it on that undulating water. The more it fluctuates, the bigger the fish.
Yeah. Well, we had several of those today, and we were surprised to the upside. There were some nice fish today.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a special place, not just for the big fish factor. Yes, there's plenty of giant greenbacks. There's plenty of masters. I think on this trip, I would say for a cold front type of situation, we did really well on numbers. I know I've come up here in the past and I've had years where we absolutely annihilated them for numbers. But then I've had other trips where the numbers weren't that great, but we caught some really big ones. And so every trip's been kind of different up here. I would say the average size fish we're catching right now is really good up here.
Yeah.
And I think the lake is really healthy. Just looking on forward-facing sonar, bopping around from spot to spot, I would say there's quite a few fish in the system right now. Because I know in years past when we've kind of bopped around and looked for fish, you hit areas where you didn't see that many fish. That wasn't the case this year. This year in particular, there's a lot of fish. And you talk to guys like Donovan, they'll say, hey, there's a ton of fish in the system right now that are, let's say, 23 to 26 inches. So there's a lot of big masters in that mix that are coming up over the next few years, which is great to see. Because I remember a few years back, it seemed like there was a lot of 19 to 20 inchers, and then they moved from, 21, 22, 23, and now they're all 24, 26 upwards, and of course there's always the big fish in this lake, and all of them are super aggressive. We had those bite windows. Again, I'm not trying to wreck the episode, and I don't think it will, but we had some bite windows today where they were really aggressive. They would come in and just seeing them on the Markham on the 2D sonar, how fast they come up and just whoop, and I always stay with the fish, even if they miss it. Sometimes they come up so fast they miss it. I remember one that you caught, your line actually slacklined.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a crappie bite. Crappies come up and slackline you.
Yep.
That thing absolutely slacklined you.
Right. And I reeled down a couple of cranks before I actually got tension on that fish. And I wanted to make sure that fish was there before I set the hook. But that's exactly what happened. It's like all of a sudden the line went dead. And I wanted to make sure that I caught up with that fish in time to actually get a good hook set.
The up bite, like crappies have the up bite. You get when especially for me, when I'm ripping those big rip and wraps, we used primarily number 5, number 6s. We would fluctuate. The light changed quite a bit today. It was cold, that high pressure in the morning. And then, we got some cloud cover in. I went back and forth between UV colors and kind of the more natural, I would call it, like the blue and silver colored rip and wraps. And boy, there was bite windows where they wanted a specific color and they were coming in hot. I mean, that's what I live for. That's why I come to Winnipeg, is that hot bite. It's not just for those big masters. Yes, they're here. I come up here because I know I have a shot at catching a 10, 12, 11, 10, 11, 12, 13 pounder. But I also come up here for how aggressive that bite is. We're in January now. A lot of bite windows are closing around, all across the ice belt as far as walleyes are concerned. You start to get into mid to late January, February, bite windows really get narrow. You're pinned to morning and evening bites most places. The daytime bite slows down. That's not the case on Lake Winnipeg. When you come up here, these bite windows change. And as the light changes down there, it's sort of like fishing Red Lake in Minnesota. It's really dark water, or Lake of the Woods. It'll be cloudy for several days. All of a sudden, that sunshine comes out and those fish come alive. It doesn't matter if it's 20 below. They come alive. And that's what I like about Lake Winnipeg. I've had trips up here where it's like I just referenced was a blizzard. We caught fish. They were biting, and they were biting aggressive. They were hitting, and you'd hit those bite windows and you'd catch them all day long. Couple things if you come up to Lake Winnipeg, be prepared, right? You have to be prepared. You've got to bring extra gear, bring extra rods, bring extra batteries, bring extras if you have them, right? Because you're bound to break something up here. It's just that brutal. The other thing is get a hold of a guide like Donovan. Collect as much information as you can, and then go with buddies like you and I came up here. We came up here with 2 separate trucks. That's another important thing. Hey, we're going to drive trucks out. Bring 2 trucks. There's not a lot of snow right now, so we didn't have to worry about breaking out the straps. But I remember trips where they, talking to my friends up here, and they said, yeah, you can drive. And we came up here, and it was an absolute nightmare. And luckily, we had a couple vehicles. So I think Bill suggested it. He said, we should drive separate. Bring 2 vehicles. Even though, we're driving the distance, it's nice to have 2 vehicles here.
Yeah. The other thing that I would add too is the importance of fishing as a team and sharing information, because look at our day cycle. As you mentioned, the rip and wrap was hot in the morning. and that was catching fish, and you were on fire with that. And I really stuck with that rattling roach spoon all day long up until the late hours today. And all of a sudden that turned on late morning into early afternoon, and that's all that they were biting on. And then we both switched to the rip and wrap at the end of the day. But to be able to share that intel can make you so much more effective. And I just, that's one thing that I appreciated about this trip is sharing that information and collectively making decisions, because taking that approach along with how we implemented forward-facing sonar and how that could potentially impact the bite. It's great to know that an area is fishy when you're using that forward-facing sonar, but then to follow up with the Markhams and to really dial down those spots was awesome. So I think that's an important part of the trip.
Well, viewers will see, how to kind of break down Winnipeg a little bit when they watch the segment. But I can say, with all honesty, without spoiling, the segment, is if you're coming up here, bring your forward-facing sonar, bring your 2D sonar for a couple of reasons. One, the forward-facing sonar is great for finding fish, but there's times where those fish do not want that forward-facing sonar hitting them. I see it all the time in open water. I see it on ice. And so, we would get into an area where we would kind of circle around and we would shine around 360 degrees and we'd get a count of how many fish were in that area. If we didn't see, let's say 20 walleyes, we would move on. Okay. And then we'd get into an area, we'd shine, we'd see fish. As soon as we started seeing them, okay, there's 4 or 5 in this direction, I would drill holes. We'd drop the Markhams down and then we'd fish them with 2D sonar, take the forward-facing sonar off those fish, and you're going to catch more at times. It's just the way it is. It's the nature of the beast, and it's the name of the game. I think people that own a forward-facing sonar can see that. They realize that there's times you have to take it off those fish, and today was no different. There were times where we could not shine on them, and you got to think about it. When you're only in 6, 7, 8, 10 feet of water, and those fish are right on top of you, that beam has got to be loud. I mean, they can feel that. They're not out 50 feet. They're right underneath you. And so there's times where you have to pull that thing away and just fish with the 2D sonars. And we do. We hole hop. Plus, it's easier than carting that around. When you're hauling rods, and like today, there was times where we were switching back and forth between spoons and rattle baits. When you've got a couple rods rigged up on the back of your Markham, it's so much easier just to travel quickly with the Markham, get on top of those fish, and then boom, that rattle bait calls them in. Yeah. Whether it's the rattle on the spoon or the rattle on the lipless crankbait, like the rip and wrap.
That was a big element to the success for the rattle and roach spoons, because you were bringing those fish into the area, and then they were a lot more interested in those spoons at the time. So maybe a little bit more of a finesse approach with those spoons at that point. But it was interesting because if you think about like the evolution of ice fishing, ice trolling was hot, and then forward-facing sonar came along and people were like, okay, I don't need to drill as many holes. But if you take a look at what we did today, when we would shine a certain area, drill 4 or 5 holes, move that beam off, and then 5 minutes later, shine another area, drill 4 or 5 holes. By the time we were done, we had a nice pattern of holes where we could just go back to a certain area and go after those fish. So don't discount the old methods that were very effective, because now it's kind of a 1-2 punch, especially when you're talking about the impact that forward-facing sonar has on fish.
Yeah, it's just kind of modernized ice trolling. And what's cool too is, like up here, it was cold, man, in the morning. I mean, we had to jump in the shelters, so we can still stay super mobile. And it's way easier now because you can just shine around and be like, okay, our fish left. We packed up, we moved the otter, and then boom, we're right back on them. And we stayed on the move the whole time. Yeah. Whether we were in the shelters or we were ice trolling, we were on top of fish the entire time. And it was cool. We followed Donovan out, and he had his guide customers, and me as a guide, the last thing I wanted to do was be on top of him. So we just kind of found our own fish once we got out to those regions. When you're fishing these basins here in Lake Winnipeg, it's nice to have guys, you talked about working as a team. It's nice to have other anglers a little ways away also looking for fish in regions. And we made micro moves. I used to come up here with guys and we'd fish for a little bit and then we'd make a micro move or we'd make a magnum move. You kind of make these micro moves when you're in fish and you really don't have to move that far. Sometimes it's 60, 70, 100 feet and then boom, you're right back in fresh fish that haven't heard the rattle baits. They haven't seen those baits. And so these micro moves paid off. We kind of stayed in that same depth range because there are times where I've come up here, I fished extremely shallow, mornings and evenings, and then I've moved out deep during the day and then, back there again in the evening or so on and so forth. We've had days where it's warmed up, so we move shallow and fish there all day, and the fish were there all day. And then I have times where it's extremely cold out and we stayed out deep, and looked deep. But we stayed pretty consistent as far as depth. I will say that. And, the fish were kind of all over there. And I think that speaks volumes to the health of this fishery right now. Because I just know looking at a forward-facing sonar, how many marks I saw and how many fish we saw over the course of the day. Pretty darn incredible. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And, as Donovan told us, fishing is great right now, but in the next couple of years, once those classes really continue to grow, man, the opportunities for masters over the next couple of years are just going to be phenomenal. But what I would say is you have to take the approach that we took today, which is you do have to be active out there because you can take one of two approaches. You can sit in a spot and if you think it's a fishy spot, wait for the fish to come to you. But I think if you're really going to be effective, you got to do what we did today.
Yeah, I'm always torn on that. I think people know me. I have to be on the move most of the time, but I am fine sitting in an area if the fish are cruising. Like if you're seeing them frequently, I know we gave ourselves, I set almost like a stopwatch at times, not literally, but we say, hey, let's give it another 15 minutes sitting in the otter. If we weren't seeing them, okay, let's re-drill and go move a little bit and make a little micro move. And that paid off. I've had times out here where you can just pop up the shelter. We saw a lot of people with pop-ups today because the wind wasn't bad and even in people in flip over otters. But I've had times where you can sit there all day long and the fish are cycling. If that's the case, great. Good for you. That means there's a lot of fish in that area. But even as many fish as we had in our area, there was times where we had to move 50, 60, 100 feet. And then, boom, we were right back on fresh fish. And it seems like we'd pick up the active ones, and then we'd have to move. Now, there were times when we were ice trolling where the fish were really active and aggressive.
Yeah.
Okay? So we didn't really have to hole hop as much. We just kind of had to hang in that region. And so there's always that game of should we move, should we not? I think if you're marking them and you're seeing fish consistently, hang there. Right? You don't have to get up and move. The grass isn't greener. Hang there and those fish are going to cycle through. Now, if you're not seeing them and if you happen to have a forward-facing sonar and you're watching around you and you're not seeing fish around you, time to pick up and move.
I was thinking about what we saw on our last area that we fished and how they just consistently kept pushing west, and they would go like 50 to 75 feet and then 50 to 75 feet. And then when we would flash back to the east, little to no fish left there. So I thought that last spot that we were at today was an example of why you'd need to keep moving.
Yeah, 100%. Now, we had a great trip up here. Short and sweet, just from a filming aspect, it sort of stinks. Selfishly, I want to stay up here 2-3 more days and fish and just have fun. But because of dialed in angling and time crunches, we got to get the camera guy back. We got to get the media back. I had a blast for as short a trip it was. We packed it in. We caught a lot of fish. I can go home with a smile on my face. I caught fish on a lipless crankbait. They absolutely smashed it. We caught a bunch on a roach spoon. We caught fish everywhere we went. We didn't I would say we kind of stayed in the same 1 mile area, wouldn't you, Bill?
Yeah, I would.
In that 1 mile area, how many fish we saw? I'm definitely going to be coming back to Lake Winnipeg, whether it's with Dial It Angling or not this season. Having a chance to film up here is a real blessing. It was great that Donovan opened, kind of rolled out the red carpet for us and was like, yeah, jump on board. I got a bunch of customers. You can just follow us out in the morning. He was super gracious in that aspect. So thank you, Donovan from Blackwater Cats. He's just more than gracious guy. Jumped on the podcast with me. It was great seeing Lee Nolden. Lee is a great friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. Him and Roger Stearns, again, the first time I came up to Lake Winnipeg, just rolled out the red carpet. Lee was guiding at the time. He's like, hey, just come out with me, follow me out. I've got a bunch of customers. Let's go catch some greenbacks. All of the guys that I have met in Manitoba and around this region have been great. So if you're looking to come up to Lake Winnipeg, certainly if you've never done it before in your life, call one of the guides. They welcome you to bring your own gear, bring your rods, but they're going to show you the ropes, how to catch them, how to fish aggressively, how to fish these lipless crankbaits, and most of all, just to have a good time. And they're good people. So,
well, and I think lastly too, Donovan kept us safe. You had to make sure that you knew the ice that you were on and the things that you were crossing, and to have a guy who's out there every day. And not only is he out there every day, his whole fleet of guides are out there. So to know that you can kind of have your mind at ease, knowing that a lot of these paths have been tested, that was a big weight off our shoulders, because then we can just focus on the fishing.
I always worry about the cracks and heaves on Winnipeg, and you hit the nail on the head. So, certainly get a hold of guides. If you're coming up here, we found, the same stuff that always works. The big bright UV colors, the pinks, the bright UVs, the whites, anything in that realm seemed to be really working for us, especially when it was cloudy or low light conditions. And then as soon as that sun pops out, man, the chromes, the chrome black, the chrome blue, those loud rip and wraps, they still work up here a ton. One of my favorite bites by far. There's 2 destinations that I love rip wrap fishing, or fishing rip and wraps. One of them, Lake Winnipeg. The second one, Green Bay. And Lake Winnipeg did not disappoint. You've got to get up here. It is one of those destinations for ice anglers that they have to experience at least once. And once they do, they're hooked. Just like Bill and I, we've been up here a ton. And, you're going to want to check out this segment of Dialed In Angling. I do a lot of what I love doing on the ice, and that's just chasing and hunting down walleyes and having a lot of fun doing it. And Lake Winnipeg is a destination that I absolutely love. Bill, thank you for being my guest on this trip and agreeing at the last minute just to hop on in your truck with your gear and come up fishing, my friend.
Well, it was an honor to be out there. That was an awesome, awesome trip. So appreciate you inviting me. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being on the podcast. I want to thank Lee Nolden from Smokin' Fish in Selkirk. And then, of course, Donovan Pearase from Blackwater Cats Outfitters. Check him out. He's a great guy, just a super, super person. You guys are going to want to check out this episode of Dialed In Angling. We tackle some big greenbacks. We get onto some really fun bites, and it was just a fun experience. Lake Winnipeg in the books. I can't believe it. I wish we could stay another week. But you're going to want to check out the episode, because we'll definitely get you dialed in.